Welcome to Browns Insider here on cleveland.com. Chris-Fedor, Mary-Kay-Cabot, Tom Reed will talk all things Browns for the next 30 minutes here on cleveland.com. Any questions, any comments, go to the comment section at the bottom of the post. The Browns 1-1. They've got a meeting with the Baltimore Ravens this Sunday. We'll talk about that. Also, a big win this past weekend against the New Orleans Saints. We'll get into that. We'll do fill in the blank in a matchup to watch. All that and more in the next 30 minutes. Mary Kay, Tom Reed, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so the Browns 1-1 coming off that win against the Saints, and they've got a meeting with the Ravens coming up on Sunday. Before we get into that, boy, that game against the New Orleans Saints, I have to be honest with you guys. At the end of it, they get the ball at their own 4-yard line, and I'm saying, oh no. Here we go again. There's no way that they're going to manufacture this game-winning drive, but they got it done, Mary Kay.
Well, you know, especially because the first pass was basically a throwaway. So you find yourself in 2nd and 10 at the 4. And you don't have Jordan Cameron. You don't have Ben Tate. It's just, Rob Ryan and his blitzing defense. And so it just seemed like it was an improbable thing, and it was. I think it's something like they had an 8% chance or something like that of actually having this happen. So it was pretty remarkable, and it took a great effort on the part of Brian Hoyer and his little band of misfits, as Tom wrote about the other day, and then some blown coverages by Rob Ryan and his defense.
Tom, it's interesting because if you go back to last year, the Browns got off to that start. They were 3-2. But this win against New Orleans, given the fact that it's one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the best teams in the NFC, does it feel different to you, this win?
Well, we'll see. There's no question it's a big win. It's against a quality opponent. Last year they went to 3-2 by beating Buffalo. So this is a real quality opponent. To me, I feel the Browns won't admit this, and nobody will admit this, but when that schedule came out, there were probably some gasps. And then you lose those guys. And I think probably in their heart of hearts, they thought if we could get one win out of these 3, we'd be ecstatic. And to me, they're going into the Baltimore game playing with house money. Because I don't think many people expected them to win a game in this group. Maybe some did. But to play well in Pittsburgh, where they always struggle, to beat the Saints, I feel they have to be pretty confident, even with the people they're still missing.
Mary Kay, given the fact you're in the locker room all the time, Tom's in the locker room all the time, does it feel different with this team right now? You
know what? I have to say, last year when they got to 3-2, it had an amazing feel to it. Brian Hoyer was rolling along. They beat Cincinnati. The rest of the division looked bad. I mean, Pittsburgh looked horrible at this time last year. Cincinnati, I was not impressed with them at all, when they played Andy Dalton early on. The Ravens didn't look good. So I think optimism was very, very high at 3-2 last year. There was talk of, perhaps them making, possibly a playoff run. So it doesn't really feel any different to me. And again, it's very, very early.
Now, I've been hard on him. I wanted Johnny Manziel to start from the very beginning. I dismissed Brian Hoyer. I'll admit it, I did. But here he is. He's 4-1 with 2 game-winning drives so far for the Browns in his 5 starts. Tom, it's getting tougher and tougher to overlook how well he plays, especially late in games.
Yeah, that's, like you said, 2 game-winning drives. It helps when you're able to run the football, which they haven't been able to do in the past, in the last couple of years. But when you can run the football and you have a guy that can make some clutch throws, as he did, you're going to have a chance to win some games. And hats off to Brian. I think he's played very well since the start of the third quarter in Pittsburgh. Had didn't have a great start the other day, but when the game was on the line, that throw to Gary Barnidge on the 4th down completion, and also the throw to Gary Barnidge on the 3rd down completion on their 2nd or 3rd touchdown when they brought Manziel in, where that drive looked like it was going nowhere. Those were 2 of the most impressive throws I thought he had of the game.
How about that, Mary Kay? They bring in Johnny Manziel, and First Energy Stadium, they were excited about it because they were finally getting a look at Johnny in a real NFL game. He comes in, he doesn't do all that much, and after that, Brian Hoyer goes from 9 of 21 to 15 of his last 19. It seemed to light a fire underneath him.
Yeah, 15 of 19 for 137 yards after that, including the sensational game-winning drive on which he was 8 of 11 for 78 yards. So I think it did light a fire under him. He's very competitive. He wants this to be his football team, and that was a statement by him saying, No, get back on the bench where you belong. This is my football team. I'm not going anywhere.
Do you expect the Browns to continue to go with the Johnny Manziel package moving forward, or are they going to scrap that altogether?
You know what? Hey, it's really good for them to be able to give the defensive coordinator of the opposing team something to think about on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, leading up to the game. They have to worry about it. You never know where they're going to pull it out. It's a great weapon for them to have, especially at a time when they were still without Josh Gordon, possibly without Jordan Cameron again, Ben Tate. So, hey, if you've got a weapon, why not use it, or at least make them think you will?
Tom, it's amazing to me because coming into this year, I think all of the questions, or a majority of the questions that the fans had about this team applied on offense, because you didn't know what you were going to have at wide receiver with Josh Gordon being suspended. After the first half of the Pittsburgh game, you no longer had Ben Tate. After the first half of the Pittsburgh game, you no longer had Jordan Cameron. And here we are through 2 games, just 2 games so far this year. But the Browns have the second most points scored in the AFC behind one team, the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and I go back to the fact that what we're talking about. Brian Hoyer has been very efficient when he's had to be, and they're able to run the ball. And the fact that they can do both, that they have the threat to do both, has helped them out immensely. I can't imagine them doing this with just the passing game. And you know what? Give credit also to Kyle Shanahan. You know, there was understandably some concern in the preseason with the way that they were not moving the ball. But I went to Washington a couple weeks before, you know, when they were about to play the Redskins, and they said, look, this is a good offensive plan for receivers. The misdirection that they run will get receivers open. And the receivers that we did not see open in the preseason, we're starting to see guys get open. And again, I think that's two-pronged. One, it's a product of the system, and two, it's the fact that they can run the ball a little bit so they can't just completely load up on the pass.
Tom, without Gordon, without Cameron, without Ben Tate, can they keep this up moving forward?
Well, I think it's going to be a tall task. I think it's continually to do it. They do have the break of coming up. They have which at first when the schedule came out, I said this is a lousy time to have a bye week.
Yeah.
But you know, with Cameron, with Jordan being hurt, maybe gives him an extra week off to heal up. And you probably get Tate back too. And then of course we're still going to have to wait on Gordon, but yeah, I think getting those guys will help because any bit you can get is good.
Mary-Kay, speaking of Jordan Cameron, he has been out. That same shoulder that he injured at Family Day. Do you expect him to play this weekend against Baltimore, or do you think they are going to hold him out through the bye week?
You know what? It probably would be best to hold him out through the bye week because he consistently has talked about the fact that, you know, it's only going to get worse if he takes another shot on it, if he falls on it again. Then you could see him out for an extended period of time. So he was limited today. I do think that it would be best for them to just let him ride this one out. Now, I don't know how they feel about it. I don't know how it's going to go as the week goes along. But, you know, why rush it and then risk having him out for 6 or 7 games?
Going back to Brian Hoyer, I saw an interesting stat today on the NFL Network. It's about the Browns in no huddle versus when the Browns do huddle. Brian Hoyer in no huddle, his completion percentage 77.8%. When the Browns do huddle, it's 54.7%. His quarterback rating in no huddle situations 118, which is 40 points higher than when the Browns do huddle. Can somebody explain that one to me?
Well, if you look back to the first half of the Pittsburgh game, it was just a dog. I mean, they couldn't get anything going.
Right.
And then it was, you know, of course, the tale of 2 halves. And they really came alive, you know, in the no huddle in that game, and then they really went to it a lot in the second game. But, you know, it has to stand the test of time. Now, teams are going to be game planning for it, and they're going to be ready for it. You had the surprise element in Pittsburgh, and they were not ready for it whatsoever. So, you know, you have to see if this is going to hold up. But Brian has the intelligence, the football acumen, the poise, and all of that to run that no huddle efficiently, and right now it's still working.
I agree. I mean, we don't want to beat the Brady thing too much, but he learned from a great guy, a guy that knows. You know, he learned at his knee of how to run these type of offenses, a high-powered attack. So I'm sure Brian is the type of guy that's going to use anything in his power to get better.
Now, when it comes down to that, Tom, do you think that's something that they can continue to do, or do you think that's something that a defense is going to see more and more of? They're going to adjust to that, and they're going to try and take that away from them.
Well, I think the best thing is that they've shown they can at least do it. So they have enough confidence to know if they need to use it, they can use it, and it's been very effective. So, yeah, I think we'll continue to see it going forward. I just don't know at this point if you're going to build your entire offense around it.
All right, now I've kind of poo-pooed the whole Tom Brady thing with Brian Hoyer learning from Tom Brady. Because, I mean, I've seen quarterbacks go to New England, go other places. They learned under Brady. They learned under Belichick. And it didn't go so well for him. Kevin O'Connell comes to mind. Who knows about Ryan Mallett and some other guys. But do you think there is some truth, Mary Kay, to the fact that Brian Hoyer did pick up on some things playing behind Tom Brady?
Yeah, I mean, he spent 3 seasons just side by side with Tom Brady. And there were plenty of times when it was just the two of them. And, they kept 2 quarterbacks on the roster. So, yes, I think he learned everything that he possibly could. I think he made the absolute most of those 3 years. He absorbed his persona, his on-the-field persona. He learned how to study. He, I mean, maybe not everyone. I mean, look at the difference in personality between a Ryan Mallett and a Brian Hoyer. Maybe Ryan Mallett didn't spend as much time just really doing everything Tom did. I think Brian did.
You know what? What strikes me about him, and the word, you used the word intelligence, good football acumen, enterprising as well. When he found out that Kyle Shanahan was going to be the offensive coordinator, one of his first phone calls was to Kirk Cousins to say, "Hey, I need a heads up. I need to get a start on this offense. What can you tell me about it?" So Brian Hoyer is an enterprising type of guy that's going to try to do anything he possibly can to get ahead, and that's just smart.
We'll preview the game against the Ravens this Sunday for the Browns. Browns now 1-1. We'll do some fill in the blank towards the end, and also look at the key matchup that could decide the game between the Browns and the Ravens. But, Tom, you did a story on the baby backs. Terrence West, Isaiah Crowell, 2 rookies. They take the place of Ben Tate. The Browns went out this offseason. They tried to address the running game. They did it in free agency with Ben Tate, the draft with these 2 baby backs. Do you think the Browns are even a little bit surprised based on what they've gotten from West and Crowell so far?
I think so, a little bit. I think that they thought that Tate was going to be able to run the ball. And in fairness to Ben Tate, when he was in there, he's run the ball well. In fact, he had 41 yards in the limited times that he got to run the ball. And I think that the running game should continue to get better as the offensive line learns more and more about this wide zone blocking scheme that Kyle Shanahan employs. I wouldn't be surprised eventually of the 2 if Crowell ends up being maybe the better back. He just seems to have that explosiveness about him that Terrence, I mean, Terrence has run the ball effectively, but Crowell, don't forget, this guy played at Georgia before he had some issues off the field. And I like him. I think he's a good back. And I like Ben Tate when he's healthy. So I think they're going to be able to continue to run the ball as long as they keep getting good play from Brian Hoyer.
We're starting to get this question more and more, Tom, in the comment section on Twitter and Facebook. How much of it is the talent of Crowell and the talent of West versus the offensive line is always one of the strengths of the Browns? At least it has been the last couple of years.
I think it's 3 things. I think it's the 2 things that you mentioned. But don't forget, they couldn't run the ball with this offensive line in the past years.
That's true. That's right.
I could still see Willis McGahee trying like 4 times to get in against Buffalo at the end zone. I think
taking 22 steps just to get to the line of scrimmage.
And I think it's 3 things. It's the talent, it's an offensive line that is pretty good, and it's the scheme. I think those 3 things together right now, and number 4, obviously, Brian Hoyer and the way he sees.
All right, time out here for a minute, guys. So let me tell you. I hate to throw water on any of this, but let's think about the defenses that they have played in the first 2 games.
Fair.
Before we go turning this Browns team into a bunch of world beaters, Pittsburgh, look what they did against the Ravens. Okay?
You're right.
That defense does not look good. At least it doesn't look good early on. And Rob Ryan's defense, although we can say what we want about what happened in that past game, Sean Payton and Rob Ryan wanted to kill each other on the sidelines of that game because Sean was so mad about some of the things that Rob Ryan was doing. And the week before that, they gave up 568 yards, second most in New Orleans history. So, you know what? We don't know. I mean, I'm sure the Browns are hoping that the baby backs are going to continue to run roughshod all over people and that Brian Hoyer is going to continue to win games. But I think we need to remember that there could have been something about these defenses in the first 2 games as well.
I think that's very fair. I mean, again, you can only play the team that's in front of you. And the other thing that, I think that one of the most interesting things about the Pittsburgh game, and let's go back to that, is they started to run the ball effectively when they were down 24 points, where you would think that, again, teams are probably playing a little bit softer because they're, you're thinking of the team's going to throw the ball, and they were able to get back in the game of the run. Now the Saints, again, that was a really good defense last year, and what's happened to it in the first 2 weeks, I don't know, but Mary-Kay's right. I mean, we'll see going forward. Again, I still think the two work together. As long as Hoyer can continue to play well, they should be able to use both things. If one starts to falter, then I think both are going to struggle.
Well, the running game is back, and that's a good thing. I mean, there was a trend in the NFL over the past couple of years to get away from it, and even when you watch the Monday night game against the Colts on Monday night and Philadelphia, the running game is starting to be back in vogue. Chip Kelly, I mean, what do you think of when you think of Chip Kelly? Pass, pass, pass. But you know what? The running game, because defenses catch up.
Yep.
And then you have to go back to what works. So this is a very balanced offense.
It's a very the games are adjusting. And one of the things that's interesting in this division this year is 2 or 3 of these teams. Pittsburgh, you saw them add LeGarrette Blount. We saw how well they ran against the Browns.
Right.
One problem for the Browns right now is they're getting also run over. New Orleans had a huge game against them. But Baltimore, they want to run the ball more. They've coming off their worst season. And, you have to be able to have some kind of balance. And obviously, Mike-Pettine from day one said this is what we want to do. But again, Mary-Kay's point's good. I mean, we'll see going forward if they can continue to put up these kind of numbers. They're probably not going to be able to. They're probably not going to be averaging 153 yards a game rushing.
Okay, so Tom and Mary-Kay, I'm guessing that teams have seen what the Browns have done so far in the first 2 games. They understand that they probably want to run the ball to set up the pass. Baltimore is the best defense that they're going to face so far in the first 3 games before the bye week. So Baltimore's probably going to try and take away West and Crowell. Can Brian Hoyer still be as successful if he doesn't have that running game to lean on?
Well, you know what? They can use the short passing game and they can do other things. But, like you said, you do want to have the running game to be able to keep honest with the passing game. But he's going to still have to have guys that are going to step up and make plays for him. I mean, some of these guys are overachieving. And Brian talked about how, hey, look, we've all been overlooked. And he loves the mindset of, these guys the Andrew Hawkins, even the Miles Austin, guys that have, are sort of like cast-offs now and people didn't want, including Brian himself. So these guys are stepping up big for him and they're making big plays. That will have to continue. I mean, that Gary Barnidge pass, like we've been saying, that catch was a tremendous catch. He had Jairus Byrd all over him, and he comes up with a big play in the clutch. Those things will still have to happen.
And that's something that hasn't happened in the past. How many times have the Browns shot themselves in the foot because Greg Little dropped what could have been a touchdown, or Devon Best dropped what could have been a touchdown, or there was a bad snap, or there was a fumble at the wrong time?
They have, they just haven't come through at winning time. I mean, this team has been so close in the last couple of years in games, but in the NFL, most of the games are close. And, one of the things that we talk about that improbable drive. But think about this. Think Chris had New Orleans scored a field goal there.
Yeah.
So again, it's all about synergy with a team. They get one big play. I mean, they didn't get many big plays from the defense all day except for Tayshaun Gibson's. But Carlos Dansby's sack just changes the entire equation because now they just need 3 points. And again, of course, starting from your 4-yard line is tough, but starting from your 4-yard line and having to score a touchdown is much tougher. So, they've gotten plays on both sides of the ball. They've got a lot of work to do on defense, but it's the guys are starting to make plays. And even though they fell short in the Pittsburgh game, to see them come back the way that they did offensively had to give that offense a lot of confidence.
So just 2 games, but with the emergence of West and Crowell, what happens when Ben Tate gets healthy?
Well, you know what? I think that Mike-Pettine is enough of a veteran type of coach and a player's coach that when Ben Tate comes back, I would think that he would resume his starting role again as long as he's healthy, because I think if you want guys to really go all out there and leave it all out on the line, that you have to show them that, you know what, you're not going to lose your job to injury. Now, that's not going to work in every situation, but, you know, that's just my gut feeling, that they're going to let him come back. He was supposed to be the starting running back. He's good at, you know, blitz pickup and those kind of things, and I would have to think that there will be a good, strong place for him when he returns.
One of the stories that a lot of people have been following this week, it's what's going on off the field. NFL close on an agreement on a new substance abuse policy. Of course, that would affect Josh Gordon. He's expected to be out 10 weeks total, but he's also expected to be able to return to the team's practice facility, something that it seems like the Browns really wanted to be the case, Mary-Kay.
Yeah, well, he will be. 10 games is it. You know, he's been informed of that. The Browns have been informed of that. It's going to be 10 games for Josh. And the commissioner is not going to suspend him anymore for the DWI. When he pleaded guilty to the DWI, that's it. There's not going to be any more games for that. It's 10 games. He can come back for the final 6. Now, there's good and bad in that. The good is that if the Browns are in the playoff hunt, and they very well might be at that point.
Talking playoffs after week 2. I'm liking it.
But you know what? I mean, you know what? It could happen.
You're right.
And if they're in it at that point, then it's fantastic for them to get Josh Gordon back at the right time. If they're out of the playoff hunt, getting him back for the final 6 games costs them a whole year of free agency for him. So 6 games is an accrued season, and he will be a free agent after the 2015 season. So then you're in a position to either have to franchise him or try to sign him to a new contract before before the season is up. And then 2016 is what it would have been had he served this season-long ban. They would have had him for a whole another year.
Tom, how are you looking at this? Are you looking at this as, okay, this is a bonus, the Browns are going to get Josh Gordon for 6 games, or are you saying, well, it shouldn't even be 10 games, maybe it should be a little less than that?
No, I think it ends up about right, because when you think about it, maybe it was 2 games more than they were expecting. I think their best case scenario, I think Mary Kay had talked to some of her sources that said before we even knew that there was going to be a new drug policy, that they were thinking, well, best case scenario is 8 games. So they're going to get him around that time. So I think they got it just about right. I think the point that you brought to begin with, during this whole time, the ability for him to come back and join the team and work out and stay in the group really is helpful for Josh, and to try to kind of the biggest thing with Josh Gordon is getting his life in order. And, it seems like when he's around the guys, things are okay. It's when he's not around the guys, then some problems happen. So
how much of a concern is that then? I mean, we're talking about something that you would say about, teenagers to some degree, and kids in high school saying, I wish that he would be around his friends more, or let's get him in the school structure, things along those lines.
At some point, he's going to have to take ownership of this. I mean, Mary Kay had the great story early in this summer with Chris Carter saying, I would cut him. Well, in some ways, the NFL cut him for 10 games. Yeah. And at some point, you have to learn. We have an example on the Browns team, a kid by Monty Bryant, basically the same age, basically told himself, I don't trust myself enough to go home. I'm going to stay here in Cleveland. I'm going to stay with Mingo and until I feel more confident. At some point, Josh is going to have to take ownership of this. He's a great player. No one questions his ability. But if he is going to make good money in this league, he's going to have to show that can be available every week.
The other thing to consider about this is he has to stay clean, and he has to stay on the straight and narrow for this thing to fly. He cannot have any more violations of the substance abuse policy, because if he does have anything else, he's probably going to be back in banished land. And when you go from banishment, which is what he was before, in banishment, you're kicked out of the league, basically, and you cannot come to the facility to work out or anything like that. When you're just serving a suspension, which is now will be knocked down to a suspension, then any player can come back. So it's not really like he's getting any special treatment and they listen to the Browns' pleas for him to come back. I mean, this is just how it works. Indefinite ban, you're out. suspension, you're allowed to be in conditioning and meetings.
So, Mary Kay, the stage that he's in right now, and I don't even know which stage it is.
Stage 3. He's
Okay.
in stage 3 of the drug policy. I know that for a fact.
Even though there's a new drug policy, or there's going to be a new one, he stays in stage 3,
Yes.
is that right?
Yes, he's in stage 3. I've been told that he is in stage 3, and that's non-negotiable. He's in stage 3, and when you're in stage 3, you're tested very, very frequently. And now, not only is he tested frequently by the NFL, but he's also on probation because of his DWI. So he probably will have perhaps additional testing through that, maybe, maybe not. But he will be held accountable for where he's at. Now, he has said numerous times that he's not a drug addict. He wants to clear the air on that. He's not a drug addict. And he very well might not be. That could be very true. I mean, if he tested negative, 70 times since 2012, he might not have a drug problem. However, he still does need to make sure that, he doesn't get behind the wheel, drinking and those kind of things. So still has some things to work out.
At the same time, isn't there some truth in saying that Josh Gordon wouldn't admit that he does have a drug problem?
Well, you know what? I can't basically take his inventory. He doesn't feel like he's a drug addict, and we don't know that. We don't know that. Let's only hope, for the sake of the Browns, the NFL, and for Josh, that he doesn't, and that now he can come back and have an uninterrupted career.
Browns 1-1 on the season, getting ready for a game against the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday at First Energy Stadium. Tom, we've been to a lot of games recently, a lot of home games recently. That place was absolutely rocking in the home opener against New Orleans.
Yeah, this is my 3rd season of coming back and covering the Browns, and that was a really loud crowd. They were really into it. The Saints a couple times had to kind of take timeouts, and there was some confusion there. And so, yeah, I think the fans were really into it. It was they built the lead early in the game, so that they had the fans behind them right off the bat, and they kept just hanging in there, hanging around. So it was great to see the fans play their part.
Before we get into the matchup of the week and the key to the game between the Browns and the Ravens, let's do fill in the blank, all right? I'm going to say a statement, and you fill in the blank for me. Blank is the biggest obstacle or weakness for the Browns that you've seen in the first 2 games, Mary Kay.
Wow. We have not heard these before, by the way. Okay, say that one more time.
Blank is the biggest obstacle or weakness that you've seen from the Browns in the first 2 games.
I would say pass defense, although Justin Gilbert cleaned up some of his issues last week and did a lot better, but going after Justin Gilbert has been the biggest problem.
I don't disagree, but I'll say run defense. They've got to get that straightened out. Pettine said today that part of this was scheme, that they were so focused on not letting to get beat on the deep ball that and I know he's done this in the past when they played in New England, Tom Brady, that they would give up runs to kind of eat clock and take away possessions, limit the number of possessions, but that run defense has to get better.
Speaking of the defense, there have been so many positives to take from the first 2 games because in the last 6 quarters, the Browns have outplayed the Pittsburgh Steelers and New Orleans Saints. But if there is a weakness, I am seeing it on defense. I'm a little bit concerned about what I've seen defensively in the first 2 games. And Mary Kay, I thought that was going to be the team's backbone. I thought they were ready to take that next step and become one of those shutdown defenses.
I think they will. I think the key here is they are learning new schemes on offense and defense. And it takes a while to get those schemes to gel together and to work together. You've got, Carlos Dansby, making the calls. So, it takes a while before it's like a well-oiled machine. Even Brian Hoyer said today, even in all those years in New England, you know what? You kind of get better as the season goes along. And then the other thing is you have rookies and young players in there. You've got a lot of guys that are just learning to play together for the first time. You've got, again, Justin Gilbert kind of working out the kinks. So I don't think that the defense you see right now will be the same defense you'll see in Week 10.
Tom, I'll start with you. Second, fill in the blank. Blank is the player for the Baltimore Ravens I worry most about on Sunday.
To me, Joe Flacco. Just he's 11-1 against these guys. Not that they don't have a lot of good players, but he's still the guy that makes this team, team, especially on offense.
Well, you know what? Since he stole Joe Flacco already, I'm going to say Terrell Suggs. He's just a Browns killer. It's going to be a great matchup against Joe Thomas. It always is. He just is relentless, and he's going to be playing against Mike-Pettine, who coached him from 2005 to 2008. He has great games against the Browns, and we'll see if he does it again.
Not just this weekend, not just talking about this Sunday's game against Baltimore, but Mary-Kay blank is the Cleveland Browns' most important player.
Brian Hoyer.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Right now, yes.
Okay. Tom?
Absolutely.
Am I allowed to agree with her?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I think Brian Hoyer they're going to go as Brian Hoyer goes. And I'll give you a point of that. Joe Thomas was talking about the run game. We dedicated so much about the run game. And it's funny because Joe has done a 180 on running. Last year he said it was dead, but now he's like, yes, he sees the value of the running game. But he says, you know what? At the end of games, it still comes down to passing. He said this before the New Orleans game. It's still, when a game is on the line in the final 2 minutes, it still comes down to the quarterback. Well, wouldn't you know it? That's exactly what happened last week.
Right.
And the quarterback was the one that delivered a win.
All right, matchup of the week, Browns 1-1, Ravens 1-1, third game, second home game for the Browns. What do you think is the key to the game or the matchup that you're going to be paying most attention to, Mary-Kay?
I think I'll probably go Joe Flacco against the Browns, pass defense, and probably, him going after the guys in the secondary again. I mean, if you look back to this past game, think about this, and who can cover Jimmy Graham one-on-one?
Nobody.
My goodness. 10 catches for 100.
So he's on my fantasy team, Mary-Kay.
That's good for you. That's what we would be talking about right now if just one thing had gone wrong on that final drive.
Right.
It would be all about how they couldn't cover Jimmy Graham and they couldn't stop the run in that game. I'm saying the pass defense has got to hold up. Joe Flacco, 11-1, like we said, against the Browns, and he's going to know where to go with that football.
Tom, last week, the matchup of the week, obviously it was Jimmy Graham versus whoever was going to try and handle him in the secondary. How about this week?
I'll go with the one that we were just talking about, the Terrell Suggs and Joe Thomas. This has always been a great matchup. They've gone against each other for years. They have a lot of respect for each other. Two All-Pros, and it'll be good to see how this works out again, because obviously you're going to have to throw the ball, and to do that you're going to need protection.
All right, Browns getting ready for their game against the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday. Browns 1-1. It's Browns Insider right here on cleveland.com. We do it every single Wednesday. Thanks to you, Tom Reed, for joining me in studio today. Mary-Kay-Cabot, thank you for joining me in studio today. And let's see if the Browns can get another win heading into the bye week. Also, special thanks to Isabel Pekowitz for running the camera, and for all of you for your questions and comments in the comments section. Don't be shy if you have any questions, comments throughout the show. Make sure you leave those in the comments section at the bottom of the post. We'll be back next Wednesday right here, Browns Insider on cleveland.com.